Welcome to a special episode of Sussex Sport Weekly podcast. I'm Matt Pole and I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Derren and Frankie, Elliott and Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford. Brighton and Hove Albion have learned their group stage fate for their first ever Europa League campaign. We'll take a look at Albion's forthcoming opponents and assess their chances of reaching the knockout stages. Meanwhile, both the Seagulls and Crawley Town will be hoping to wrap up a few more transfer deals ahead of tonight's deadline. We'll run the rule over Brighton and Crawley's deadline day so far and assess their business during the summer transfer window. But first, as mentioned, Albion have discovered who they will take on in their inaugural Europa League campaign. The Seagulls will take on former European Cup winners Ajax and Marseille, as well as Greek champions AEK Athens in Group B. What do you make of the draw, Derren? Plenty for Albion fans to get excited about there.
Really good away trips on the cards for Albion. It's going to be really tough games. Three really good. But the locations and the travel that the Albion fans were going to be hopefully experiencing is going to be something to remember forever. For your first foray into Europe to Athens, Amsterdam, and then Marseille as well. It's just it's what Brighton fans have been thinking about when they first qualified for Europe, and then to get these three draws are going to be a great occasions for the club and for the fans. But they're going to have a lot of work to do on the pitch. They're really, as I said, some really tough teams. And if they can get out of that group, then De Zerbi and the team will have pulled off some good performances and some good results to get there. But yeah, it looked great. It looked good to see the Brighton in the Monaco as part of the draw. The camera pan to Paul Barber, the Brighton CEO, and Paul Camillan, the head of press, just as the draws confirmed, they were sort of trying to contain their delight. They were looking pretty cool. I think they carried it off quite well. But it was a great occasion to see Brighton in the draw, and an even better draw for them. And quite rightly, the fans are excited by it. Is
there added excitement by the fact that all three are, maybe let's say AEK Athens, but Ajax and Marseille are all household names, Derren? Would it be a little bit different if they'd managed to draw the team from Azerbaijan or something like that?
I think they'd still sort of embrace the experience, and you never know what you're going to get as you go into the group stages of the Europa League, because as you say, there's sort of teams, lesser known teams and countries which perhaps don't have the rich footballing history as like you say, the Ajax and the Marseille all within the draw. But you have to be prepared to come up against them and go to these places if you're in the Europa League. But yeah, I think though, if you'd ask most Brighton fans, they would pick going to Amsterdam over. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think there's some really tasty looking ties for Brighton fans to get into.
What do you make of the draw, Frankie?
Yeah, for a fan, it's a brilliant draw. I mean, I would add just on the Athens side of it as well. I know Ajax is obviously a great team to be playing, as is Marseille. Athens have got a really strong history in European football as well. If you look back to sort of the 70s and 80s, they were always in the European Cup. They've always been, one of the best side in Greece, and it's also the capital as well. It's a beautiful city to visit. But the history in that team is long and actually quite checkered from European football. So it's three big historic European clubs. On the footballing side, as I'm not a fan, you would be quite worried because these are three teams. Well, certainly Ajax and Marseille, who have played Champions League football and have got a lot of Champions League experience. So, I mean, even Ajax, I think they got to the final in 2016 of this competition, and even the Champions League semi-final in 2018. So, in terms of picking up points away from home, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. So, I think the games of the Amex are going to be critical in regards to how Brighton do in this campaign.
And how do you think they'll get out of the group? As I said in the Sussex Sport Weekly group chat, I pessimistically backed Brighton to finish third. Do you think it's a tough draw. Do you think they've got what it takes to beat Marseille and Ajax at home and away?
I think at home they've got every chance because the Amex atmosphere for what would be the first ever European adventures for that stadium and that team, they could play anybody really in some respects. They really could, because it would be such a difficult ground to go to. I think they've got to look at third place as a good thing though, because as we said before, third place means Conference League, and that keeps that European bug alive, so to speak. So I don't think third place is a bad thing. I think that's where they will finish. But if they can pick up a result, a point away from home in places like Marseille and and Athens particularly, then they've got a chance. But like I say, there's a very, very difficult ground to go to. So I think in some respects, aiming for a top 3 finish, not just a top 2 finish, is what the club should be looking at.
Mark, in terms of them playing Marseille and Ajax, as I said, they're historical teams that have won the Champions League. Can you tell us a little about their successes?
Well, when the draw came out, I really had a sort of sense of nostalgia because it was sort of my sweet spot of when I was into football and Champions League and that. And I looked up when Marseille won it in '93 against Milan. They won 1-0. If you look at the two teams that day, it was sensational. And Marseille had Fabien Barthez in goal, Jocelyn Angloma, Eric Dimeco, Basile Boli, who scored the winner, Frank Sauzet, Marcel Desailly, Jean-Jacques Aideli, Alan Boxic, Rudy Voller, Abide Pele, and Didier Deschamps as captain. I mean, and the team they beat, I think, is arguably the greatest club side of all time. Sebastiano Rossi, Tassotti, Maldini, Albertini, Costa Curto, Baresi, Lentini, Rijkaard, Van Basten, Donadoni, and Massaro. I mean, absolutely.
It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, and I mean, I know Marseille obviously aren't as strong as that, but just to have that in your history and that it always stands you in good stead. And then you look at the Ajax side that won it in '95 as well.
Oh,
again,
ridiculous that team! Yeah,
again beating Milan. Van der Sar, every single name a household name. Van der Sar, Reisiger, Blint, Rijkaard, De Boer, Seedorf, Finidi George, Edgar Davids, Ronald De Boer, Jari Littman, and Mark Overmars. And again, they beat Milan, which was pretty much the same side that went in. It just sensational. And I mean, just the fact that Brighton are playing that level of club now is just dreamland, isn't it? It's so great. And the fact that we as journalists get to cover that kind of stuff as well, just a dream for us as well, isn't it? So
really good.
I just got a real sense of nostalgia when that draw came out earlier. And it's going to be a memorable one.
I think that's where the likes of sorry, Matt. Sorry.
That's right. No, carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's where the likes of James Milner and Adam Lallana and the Joel Veltmans, that's where they're really going to come into their own in this squad. I think Joel Veltman, they got to the semi-finals when they were beaten by Tottenham in just a few seasons ago. So I think having those three within the squad as well should really help them prepare, for these games.
Do we also think that Brighton's group is, for better or for worse, the toughest group in the whole competition? Because looking at it, it's different. I don't think you can pick a winner out of those, although I do think, as I said, Brighton will struggle.
It's definitely a group of death. They don't really happen in sort of Champions League, Europa League draws. But as you say, Brighton are probably, they have the least European pedigree of all those sides in the group, but they're one of the strongest teams on paper, so to speak, because last season Deserby's football was some of the strongest in Europe. So it makes all four teams, and Athens will be, like I said, a tough place for teams to go to. So all four teams have a chance of beating the other, especially when they play them at home. And that really makes it quite interesting football, because I think a lot of the times when you watch Champions League football in particular, especially in the group stage, you know the result. When Basel play Real Madrid or when PSG play, it's a pretty much guaranteed win, and they get through the group comfortably. All four teams. I mean, Ajax could easily could not qualify. So it's a very exciting thing for Brighton to be a part of, not just for Brighton fans, but I think fans of football in general.
And finally, before we move on to the deadline day, chaps, can I get your predictions on how the group will finish? Starting with you, Derren, how do you see it finishing at this early stage?
Well, I'm quite optimistic actually already, because I just think that I know these teams have in the here and the now at the present, and Brighton are quite a long way down in the project. I know they've lost a couple of players, but they have an established style. So I really think they can attack this and either potentially top the group or certainly get second. I'm confident they'll qualify from the group.
Oh, Mark, do you agree with Derren?
I do, yeah, mainly because of De Zerbi. I think he'll be key in making the right decisions at the right time in these group matches and that. It won't be easy. I mean, have they still got any of the De Boers playing for them? I don't know. I don't know anything about them really anymore, but which is to my detriment. But I'd like to think Brighton can more than hold their own in it. Topping the group might be a bit of a pipe dream, but certainly second, I think. they can come. But yeah, I mean, like Frankie said about Athens, I mean, people will see them as the minnows of the group, but they've got a rich history as well. So yeah, no, there's going to be no easy games for them. But De Zerbi, we know what he can do, so I think put our trust in him.
Frankie, do we have trust in De Zerbi?
Yeah, I would say Marseille, I think, will top the group. I think they've built quite a strong side over the last 2 years. They should have got out of the Champions League group last year if they didn't sort of bottle it against Tottenham in the final group game. And they started the season quite well in League One. So I think Marseille will finish top. And obviously, Marseille is an incredibly tough ground to go to for any team. So I would Marseille. I think Ajax is not as strong as people make out. They didn't win the league last year. They've lost an awful lot of players. Obviously, Kudus has gone this summer. I think they're in a bit of disarray. I think Brighton have a chance against Ajax at home. And obviously, to go to the Johan Cruyff Arena will be an amazing experience. So I actually think I'm going to be optimistic to say Brighton will come second. I think Ajax might finish third. I think they're in a lot of trouble, and Athens to finish fourth.
And do we know when the group stage fixtures are officially announced, out of interest?
It just said to be confirmed very shortly when I looked earlier. So they haven't the dates are locked in, but we don't know who they're going to play on what dates as yet. But we're hoping to get those confirmed soon. I imagine a lot of the fans will be eager to see that so they can organise their travel arrangements as well.
Yeah, part of the reason that Paul Camlin was at the draw today is because after the draw, all the head of communications and from each team, they go into a massive room and they have to work out which fixture suits which date. So they're currently at the moment deciding the dates right now to make sure they interline with not interacting with like Brighton, a massive event happening in Brighton on the Thursday night, or the Rugby World Cup in Marseille, for instance. So all these things are being decided. So they're hoping to get it done by this evening is the plan.
We shall wait and see. But yes, moving away from the Europa League. Transfer deadline day today, and Brighton have announced a season-long loan signing of Barcelona and Spain star Ansu Fati. How big of a coup is this transfer, Derren, and where do you see him featuring Roberto De Zerbi's squad? We asked Will Huggle yesterday if he could imagine 2 years ago Brighton signing a player from Barcelona, and the answer was emphatically no. So they've come a long way in those 2 years, haven't they?
They have come a long way. If you look at sort of just this day in isolation, if they've been in a Europa League draw and then signed a player from Barcelona, it's quite an upward curve that Brighton have been on for the last 10 years or so. But yeah, he looks as though he's going to be a really good addition to the squad. He's a great replacement for Julio and Ciso. So it's a loan deal for the season, as you say, with no option to buy. So he's contracted with Barcelona until 2027. And they've got no plans to sell him at the moment. It's something crazy, like £1 billion release clause as well in his contract, and I think even Tony Bloom would struggle to match that. But it's going to be for one season only. But so it's going to be a case of let's try and get the best out of him whilst he's with Brighton. He will, because Enciso is going to be missing for all of the group stages at least for the Europa League. He's hoping to be back in about 4 months' time. So it's brilliant that they can get a player of Ansu Fati's caliber to come in and fill the gap that Enciso's left, and hopefully add a little bit more on top of that as well. He's an absolute class act. He's Spanish international, one of the most highly rated young players in Europe, and he's unlucky not to be in the Barcelona team. Really, He's always been sort of first sub or second sub, so he's been in and around the team last season so much, but he just couldn't get ahead of the likes of Lewandowski as well up in the attack. So yeah, he's going to be a really exciting addition, and a lot of the credit has been going to De Zerbi. Apparently, he spoke to Tottenham on the Wednesday, was considering Tottenham's bid, but then he spoke to De Zerbi. And that swayed him really. So it's the style of football that De Zerbi played, and the charm and that he possesses as well that sealed the deal. So yeah, very exciting for Brighton.
Matt, sorry. One of my favourite tweets today was Steve Alliston, who's the Crawley Town chaplain. And he's obviously a Brighton fan, and he's sort of echoing what Will Huggle said yesterday. Seriously, when it was announced the signing of Ansu, I was excited about us signing Gary Hart in 1998 from Stansted for £1,000 and a set of tracksuits. We've come a long way. So, I quite enjoyed that today. But it's incredible, isn't it?
Well, it's the person who Barcelona basically made heir apparent to Lionel Messi, isn't it? And now he's playing for Brighton.
Yeah.
crazy, isn't it? But
I think they're going to pay. They're going to pay 80% of his wages.
Yes,
while they're there. So he's apparently he's on about just under 200 a week at Barcelona. So Brighton have apparently agreed to pay 80%. This was the report of that. So that works out about 160.
I was going to ask you, Frankie, but is the season-long loan move for Fatty a win-win? And as Derren mentioned there, like the 80% wages, is that a concern for someone who has had, we discussed this on the last podcast, quite a big history of knee problems, or am I being, again, pessimistic and miserable?
No, I think you have to be slightly pessimistic because sometimes in football it can be too good to be true. Why are Barcelona letting, you say all the things there. He was given Lionel Messi's number after he left. He was seen, he's been widely regarded as one of the best young talents in football. The Spain national team rate him very, very highly. He's got £1 billion release clause in his contract. He's coming to Brighton. That's amazing. But why? That just, sometimes those things don't add up. And the worrying thing you would say is the knee problems, because he only started 12 games last year. They preferred to play Gavi in front of him, who is normally a central midfielder. They played him left wing. He can play everywhere across the front line, but doesn't really know his best position. He used to play up front. Now he's been playing out left. He can play on the right. There's a number of factors in there that could mean it doesn't work. Also, you've got the fact that this is a superstar, Brighton's first ever superstar player coming and playing with players that aren't superstars. How does he cope with that? How does he react to that? Is he going to follow the team ethos, so to speak? So all those factors are there, and we'll have to wait. That's a wait and see scenario. But on the flip side of that, all those things I just said about him being one of the best young talents, being linked to Messi, all those sort of things, if they come true, Brighton's got that to watch, which is you can't really get your head around. When he was given the number 10 shirt, Brighton were just trying to stay in the Premier League.
Yeah,
2 years down the line, he's competing for a spot in the Albion first team. People are saying, where does he fit in? Which is a mental thing to be saying about someone of this caliber. So you've got to stay on the exciting thing, because if it works, it really strengthens Brighton as well. In regards to De Zerbi's attacking football, creating lots of chances, having Fatty on the end of those, the number of goals they could score and he could score on this team. Let's not forget, he chose this team because of De Zerbi's style of football. If he slots in well, he could score a lot of goals in this side. You've got to be wary, because you never know how it will work. These deals sometimes don't work. As I said yesterday, Renato Sanchez, Swansea, was a disaster. So we don't know. If it does work, it could really work, and it could really help Brighton in both the Europa League and the Premier League as well.
Well, the kind of, again, losing Renato Sanchez is kind of like a warning. The one that sticks in my mind is when Radamel Falcao went to United on loan from Monaco.
Absolutely. When those loan moves come in towards the end of the window, it's normally not in this situation. It normally reeks of desperation, because it's like we need to get somebody in. It's obviously not in this case. It's an extraordinary case, but you just have to ask these questions, because, like I said, these things don't happen for no reason in some respects. But as De Zerbi was saying today in his press conference, if he can get him to his full potential, Brighton have a potential world-class player in this, which is an amazing thing to have.
Moving away from Ansu Fati, Derren, are we expecting any more new faces in at Brighton, or are we expecting a quiet few final hours of the deadline day?
I think now that the Fati deal is over the line, it's I don't think there'll be too many more. I'd be surprised if there is another arrival. There has been some talk of ML Smith-Rowe from Arsenal, but I can't see that happening now. To be honest, I think that may have been a backup if they couldn't have got this loan deal over the line. So no, I think that will probably be about it in terms of incomings. And I think if you look at it on the whole, they have recruited well this summer. The likes of Mahoud, Milner, strengthening that midfield. They've got Igor Julio, the left-sided defender, Bart Verbruggen, the goalkeeper as well, and then João Pedro as well. You've got Simon Adingra, who's come in from loan after a great loan as well. So I think overall it's been a really solid transfer window in terms of incoming. Obviously, they've lost Caicedo, which Carlos Baliba should should cover his loss there, and Alexis McAllister went as well. But overall, I think a pretty good transfer window, and it should set them up quite nicely for the Premier League and the Europa League.
And Frankie, on the reverse of that, are we expecting any more players to leave Brighton potentially? I've seen that Stephen Alzate has been linked quite heavily with the move to, was it Everton, Wolves, or a European club? And I can't remember which two at the moment.
Yeah, so that is the main one. From what De Zerbi was saying, it wasn't confirmed, but it looked very much like he was not to say he wasn't wanted per se, but he was more than welcome to let him leave. So I imagine that'll be a late window move. In the last couple of hours, I imagine that will be completed. So he will be gone. Facundo Buonanotte is going to stay. I mean, De Zerbi was praising him very highly today in his press conference, comparing him to the likes of Ansu Fati and saying he has the potential to be world class. So I imagine he'll be a much more stronger part of the first team plans than any of the other players on the fringe of the Brighton squad. So that's good news for him and obviously for Brighton fans. Obviously, Enciso's injury last week means that Buonanotte might have more of a chance of getting into the side over the next couple of months. But I think Brighton have done really well. If you look at today in particular, obviously they had Fati come in, but selling McAllister and Caicedo, I know Caicedo was a couple of weeks ago, but selling them before they got to this period, I think it's done the world of good. If you look at Fulham today, obviously they're losing João Palhinha to Bayern Munich. That's a really big player to lose, fantastic player. To lose him with 3 or 4 hours to go, it creates such panic in your structuring of your team and how you're going to get somebody in and how do they fit into the side. Brighton have really done well to avoid that by selling their big players, and Alzate, if he goes or stays, is not going to make too much of a difference in that sense. So I think Brighton have played the window brilliantly because they knew they were going to have to sell players, and they've done it in the right way and got the best price for them as well.
Last two questions on Brighton. Derren, I've kind of touched on it there. How would you rate their transfer window if it closed today out of 10? Or you're on mute.
Sorry, chap. I'd give them an 8. I think it was inevitable that Caicedo and McAllister were going to leave, and I think how they've coped and adapted around that is very good as well. The goalkeeper that they've brought in as well, Bart Verbruggen, I think he could potentially be an upgrade on Robert Sanchez. I know he let 3 in on his debut, but I think you struggle to put him at fault for any of those. I think so. I think he will go on to be a very good keeper. So yeah, I think a really good transfer window for Brighton.
And what about yourself, Frankie? Finally on Brighton.
Yeah, I think it's been a really, really good window. If you have to accept that you're losing your 2 best players, they've done it very well. They've got the best deal for that. Like I said, they managed to get it done early. They managed to get a lot of money for them, and they've managed to bring in replacements as well. So they've done really well on that front. I think the only negative you would say in that, and this is due to the size of Brighton and the financial capabilities they have, they probably haven't replaced them with players that can go in straight away. Caicedo was so important last season, and Carlos Belba is not quite there as yet. And obviously with Mo Dahoud, that's going to take some time for him to adjust and probably get match fit as well. So they're not where they were when Caicedo and McAllister were at the club, and that's the only hindrance. But in regards to the recruitment they've got enough depth now for both the Premier League and Europa League. That's a massive tick. They brought in players that are a step above the players they used to bring in before they got into Europa League. That's a massive bonus. And, they signed one of their best ever signing at the end of the window as well. So I'd actually go a bit higher. I'd say it's a 9 out of 10 for me.
Blimey. Well, moving on to the hive activity that is Brighton to Crawley Town, Mark Dunford. Is anything at all happening on transfer deadline day at Broadfield Stadium?
Currently, no. You'd be expecting them to bring somebody in. But yeah, so far, quiet. The only sort of hint I've had from the club is that they're hoping something will happen, but there's nothing concrete yet. So the rumours are that Chimechi Eze will be coming in, 21-year-old brother of Eberiche Eze from Crystal Palace. He's a forward. They obviously need a forward after Telford leaving. But yeah, that's the only one. I mean, they did bring in the Chesterfield's answer to Ansu Fati in Lawrence Maguire. But they brought him in, was it yesterday or the day before, on loan from Chesterfield. A decent signing, shores up the back, which is good. And obviously, Dion Conroy missed the defeat at Swindon on Saturday, the heavy 6-0 defeat. Whether that's a bit of, because he's only on loan until January, whether they've seen Dion Conroy had a big injury at the end of last season, he was out over the summer. So whether there's a repeat of that, I don't know. But yeah, I think they do need to bring in someone. But yeah, so far what I've got from people is that Eze is the only one that's really people are talking about. So, but I mean, last week we were all shocked when Dom Telford left. So who knows? There might be a shock signing. I predict at about 1:45 to midnight tonight when I turn my computer off.
Going back to Lawrence Maguire, Mark, what's the general reaction been to him signing? It doesn't seem like he's going to be a star. It just sounds like he's going to be another body, from what I gather.
I think so. Yeah, I think it is going to be another body that. I mean, he obviously can play. I think he's quite highly rated at Chesterfield. He's still quite relatively young, the younger brother of Harry Maguire, obviously. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's not a signing that excites the fans, but I think the fans at this point are glad to see another body in the squad, because although they had that brilliant start, the last 2 games, although they absolutely battered Gillingham and lost, Saturday they did not batter Swindon and lose 6-0. So I think the people was because there was two or three changes to the team that played Swindon, and I think it kind of exposed the depth of the squad a little bit. So yeah, I think if they can bring in a couple of extra bodies today, whether it be on loan or permanent signings, I think it'll be a good thing and it'll excite the fans a little bit more.
You've mentioned Dom Telford there, so obviously Reds crying out for a striker, but are there any other positions that need sorting?
No, I don't think so, because assuming they can keep clear of injury, it is the striker that is the problem, and that has been a problem for quite a few seasons. So they've never had that 20, 25 goal a season thing which is going to shoot them up the table, and that's why they've been where they've been in the last few years. I can't remember, the last proper goal scorer they probably had was James Collins a few seasons back, the Republic of Ireland striker who went on to play for Luton as they went up the leagues. So yeah, it's I think the striker is what they need, but I think we've said it before on this. If there was a 20 goal a season striker, somebody has already snapped them up, or they wouldn't be available at this point unless they unearth a loan signing like an Eze from Crystal Palace under 21s who can come in and surprise. I remember they did it with Carlin.
Herne Grant.
Herne Grant from Charlton. They brought him in. This was the second half of the season, and he was absolutely brilliant. And he came in, and then he was signed by Huddersfield from Charlton, I think, and he played in the Premier League. So maybe an Eze, someone like that, will come in and do that for Crawley. But you're not going to get a 28-year-old, 30-year-old experienced striker to come in and get you the goals you need at the moment. At this point of the transfer window, I wouldn't have thought so. But they definitely need extra support up front. Danilo Orsi, he's looked really good, but he's not going to score goals and goals and goals. So, and to be fair, Dom Telford never scored goals and goals and goals. He scored 15 goals last year. A few of those were a penalty spot, but he played 47 games, and the season before he'd scored 25. But before that, he'd never scored more than about 10 in a season. So he's not the prolific striker that maybe Wagme and Crawley tried to make him out to be when they signed him, kind of thing. So, but yeah, who knows? It'll be interesting to see if they do get the younger Eze, if he's anything like his brother, he's going to set the Broadfield Stadium alight, isn't he? So let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Well, it's either that or Thomas Verheidt, Mark. Do you reckon he'll come back?
Yeah, Thomas Verheidt. They go. We always talk about need a big striker. They got the big striker, and it turned out he was useless. So yeah, but he's done very well back in his homeland, hasn't he? So
yes.
Yeah, he was a lovely bloke, but didn't quite fit.
Being polite, I think. Would you be worried if you were a Crawley fan and they didn't address us or bring in a new striker at all?
Well, if I was a Crawley fan, I'd be worrying all the time because that's what they appear to do. I think there would be a slight concern because if they go to Stockport tomorrow, and I mean, I think they might pick up a draw or something at Stockport. I can't remember what I know I wasn't on the podcast yesterday, so I didn't predict. But I think they could go there and get a draw maybe. Because Stockport haven't had the best start. But if it's a 0-0 draw, that's 3 games on the trot where they haven't scored a goal in the league. And then, you start to worry. So yeah, no, it is a bit of a concern, and I think fans, if they don't bring anyone in, will inevitably moan about that. And as soon as they go a game without scoring a goal again, they will just put it down to that reason solely. So yeah, they need something.
Finally on the. Well, I've been so obsessed about Crawley Town strikers, Mark. But is there a worry about their strength in depth? Because that was it. Orsi, Lolos, and is that it, or have I forgotten anyone?
No, I mean you've got Harry Forster, who came in from Bromley. He impressed during pre-season, but then had an injury, and he's made a couple of substitute appearances. But he will, I imagine, a fully fit Harry Forster will be part of that three going forward, maybe replacing where Dom Talford was playing just behind. We've got, like you say, Clyde Lolos and Danilo Orsi. Adam Campbell can play up top. He scored a few goals for when he was at Gateshead and that. But yeah, you got Jed Brown is listed as a forward.
Yeah.
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 He'll get you some views on YouTube, but whether he's going to score you 20 goals, I don't think so. And that's no disrespect to him. That sounded very dismissive of him, but yeah, he hasn't really had a chance yet to impress. But there's probably a reason for that. So it is a big. There's no. I mean, yeah, if Orsi, Forster, Lolos all get injuries, I mean, what do they do?
What do they do?
Yeah, what do they do? You got Idi Adeyemo as well, who again I saw when he came on when he was on trial at East Grinstead, and he looked good, and Scott Lindsay was raving about him, but we haven't seen him have a chance yet. Whether I don't know if there's injury to him or not, but maybe he is like one of these people that's going to play, and then suddenly it's like, whoa, where were they hiding him, kind of thing. And that's what Scott Lindsay's going to do, unleash him on if they don't get anyone else in. So yeah, strength and depth is a concern. We're certainly up top for Crawley Town, I think.
And finally, on Crawley Town transfers, Mark, how would you rate their window so far?
Well, they've pretty much. It's been a strange one, hasn't it? Because they've literally changed their whole squad pretty much. Again, yeah. So the second season on the trot. I think the star sort of signings, Liam Kelly certainly in midfield has looked really good. Along with Jay Williams as well, the sort of in the centre of midfield, those two. Liam Kelly is just an absolute workhorse, covers every blade of grass. Jay Williams is just sitting there in that defensive midfield, just waiting to play up, and looks really good. I think he's been really impressing the fans. And then you've got a lot of good players who maybe squad player. Adam Campbell, he's come on as subs and impressed. Will Wright has looked good as well, and he's going to be in dead ball situations as well. We saw him the first day against Bradford when he scored the free kick that won him the game. I think he's going to be, if he can get 10 goals this year from the defensive point of view, from dead balls and assists as well, to the way he delivers the ball, that could be interesting. But it's probably, if they can get a striker in today, we're going to get any striker in today, I think you'll give it a good 8 out of 10. But at the moment, it's probably 7.5 out of 10 for Crawley. I think Lindsay would have probably liked a bit more firepower up top. And I'm sure they're trying, but it's just, who's available and attracting them to Crawley Town as well.
Frankie, as the manager of AFC Vardini's reserves, are you on the blower to anyone trying to wrap up any deadline day deals?
No, we're all good. We managed to secure all our signings before this day. We're a much more organised squad. Matt Waterman, our top goal scorer from last season, said he was going to retire at the end of last season, but I sweet talked him into it. A couple of pints, and he's back for this season as well. So all those allegations of him joining the Vets team is not true. So
we're not going to see him turn up in a car park, hanging out his car, begging for a move to QPR or anything like that.
Oh no, he does that most Fridays, but he will. No different from normal. But 3 wins from 3 so far. So we're.
You say he's a striker, yeah, Frankie. Will Scott Lindsay be in his driveway trying to get him to?
That may be more likely.
I think that's how De Zerbi got fatty as well. As a couple of pints in the local pub.
A man after my own heart. That's what I like to hear.
Brilliant.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, chaps. You can catch up with all the latest transfer news on sussexworld.co.uk/sport. As the deadline day ticks over. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you for our regularly scheduled Sussex Sport Weekly podcast next Thursday.